Going.
So we are going to be doing a bourbon tasting. For this tasting, I chose two different bourbons. I chose a wheated bourbon and a bourbon with rye. Now the difference between these is that they're mash bills. Instead of both containing rye, one contains wheat, which is the maker's, and Woodford Reserve with rye. Now a mash bill is just the grains, the mixture of grains that consist of the bourbon. So if you would like to cleanse your palate, there is filtered water, not tap. You can't use tap water as a palate cleanser because of the iron and chlorine concentration in tap water, which will contaminate with your palate. So we are going to use the 3-sip method as our tasting technique today, and I will explain to you why, but first I'm going to show you why. So hold out your hand for a second. Just going to pour just a little bit on your hand. A little bit on your hand. Okay. Now, rub your hands together and sniff. You smell that alcohol? It kind of smells like you just put hand sanitizer on. Rub again. Now smell. You get a lot of that wood, the oak, the charred barrel. One more time. Vanilla, the sweet, the sugars, the caramelized sugars inside the barrel. Each time you rub your hands together, the alcohol is evaporated a little bit. So the reason I showed you this is because with the 3-sip method, each sip, your tongue acclimates to the alcohol in the bourbon. So you don't just want to throw it back and try to pick up on flavor notes on the first sip, because your taste buds and your taste receptors are going to be overstimulated by the ethanol and the alcohol in the bourbon, and it's just your pain receptors are going to be overstimulated, and that's all you're going to pick up on. So in order to really taste the flavors that bourbon has to offer, you have to acclimate your palate and then taste. So on that third sip is really when your tongue has kind of acclimated a little bit and you're going to pick up on those flavors. So we're going to start with the Woodford Reserve Distiller Select. It is owned by Brown-Forman, made here in Millville. So go ahead, actually this one right here. Really good, but still on that first sip, you notice a little bit more of the alcohol, right? So just kind of wait a minute. You don't really want to rush through it. You want to take your time, let your palate acclimate to the alcohol, and we'll take another sip. Wait a little bit, and if you actually want to save a little bit on your third sip, you can, because there is food to do a food pairing. So if you want to compare and contrast, we have Parmesan, walnut, and cranberry, dried cranberry, so craisins. So you can experiment a little bit with that after we taste them and really see how that affects the flavor of what you're drinking. So now we'll take that third sip. Kind of roll it over your tongue and really try to see what flavors you pick up on. I have a bourbon flavor wheel right here for you. You can look at that and kind of see what flavors come to mind or just on the top of your head.
Straight up, the new oak's what I kind of got a hold of.
Well, what do you, I know you don't have to.
Want to take your time?
Yeah. For me too as well. I usually always pick up on the oakiness, the charred, those caramelized sugars that come out of the barrel when it's aging, like vanilla, sometimes a little nuttiness. All right. So if you would, before we try our makers, which is a wheated bourbon, if you want to cleanse your palate, you can. Actually, before we do that, I wanted to tell you the mash bill of the Distiller Select is 72% corn, 18% rye, and 10% barley. So it actually has quite a bit of the rye content, and that rye is what's going to give you that spicy flavor. And I want you to kind of think of that while we're going into the Maker's Mark, which is a wheated bourbon, because your wheaters are sweeter and they're a little bit smoother on the palate. It's a lot of times why women prefer them, myself included. So we'll go ahead and take our first sip of the Maker's. Has a much smoother aftertaste, doesn't linger as long. Now, a little bit of that is just because you have already acclimated from the first bourbon. So, besides that, it is also smoother, but you're also acclimated a little bit more. So, regardless, whatever you're tasting next is going to seem a little bit smoother just because you've acclimated. But this is smoother because of the wheat instead of the rye content in the mash bill.
Okay.
All right. So, we'll take another sip. The last one. All right. Any flavor notes that you're immediately picking up on? Could you tell a difference?
Yeah, definitely a difference.
It really doesn't stay as long on the back of the tongue. It doesn't burn. Doesn't have that sensation that you get from the bourbon with the rye in it. It's a little bit milder.
Milder, but like, I don't know, it didn't taste as good. It was
Well, I mean, it's completely what your palate prefers, what you prefer. A lot of people prefer rye. That's why there's a whole rye bourbon. Well, rye whiskey. It's not even a bourbon because instead of being 51% bourbon, it's 51% or more rye. So it's not even technically a bourbon. It's a whiskey. So that's why people really like that rye flavor. It's why but there are also not only wheated bourbons, but wheat bourbons made with wheat. Heaven Hill actually makes one. So, all right, now if you would like to experiment, taste some of your craisins, your walnuts, your cheese, and kind of see how they pair or how they change the flavor of the bourbon. It's really interesting. It's really unique how some of them really affect. And then you'll notice also, like, you'll taste one and take a sip and you'll notice other flavor notes. So, okay.